Impact! We missed you so much last week and we hope you had a happy Easter. Just a reminder, we are still using YouTube and Instagram for all of our things. We have Tuesday Night Melee with Mike, Thursday we have the game show with Josh, and Fridays we have Adulting with Hannah. So make sure to follow us on Instagram at WCL_impact and subscribe right now to our YouTube channel. You're here, so scroll down, press subscribe, and then click the bell and you'll get notifications whenever we post new things. Have you ever seen one of those movies when they start with the end at the beginning? Well, that is exactly what we're doing in this new series we're starting today called Kickstart. We all know last week was Easter and we learned and we know how that story ends, but we want to take some more time in the next few weeks and talk more about how, because of Jesus, what does Easter really mean? So let's get ready for a time of worship. Turn up your TV, have fun, and sing with us.
There's a grace when the heart is under fire. Another way when the walls are closing in. And when I look at the space between where it used to be and this reckoning, I know I will never be alone. There was another in the fire, standing next to me. There was another in the waters, holding back the seas. And should I ever need reminded of how I've been set free, there is a cross that bears the burden, where another died for me. There is another in the fire. In the fire. All my dead left for dead beneath the waters. I'm no longer a slave to my sin anymore. And should I fall in the space between what remains of me and this reckoning, either way, I won't bow to the things of this world. And I know I will never be alone. There is another in the fire, standing next to me. There is another in the waters, holding back the sea. And should I ever need reminding, power set me free. There is a grave that holds nobody, and now the power lives in me. There is another in the fire. Hear the roar in the heavens as the space between we're standing. I can feel the ground shake beneath us as the prison walls cave in, and nothing stands between us. Nothing stands between us. There'll be another in the fire, standing next to me. There'll be another in the water, holding back the sea. And should I ever need reminding, how good you've been to me? count the joy come every battle, 'cause I know that's where you'll be. I count the joy come every battle, 'cause I know that's where you'll be. Standing here in your presence, in a grace so relentless, I am won by perfect love, wrapped within the arms of heaven, in a peace that lasts forever, sinking deep in mercy. See, I'm wide awake, drawing close, stirred by grace, and oh, my heart is yours, and all fear removed. I breathe you in, I lean into your love. Oh, your love. When I'm lost, you pursue me. Lift my head to see your glory, Lord of all. So beautiful. Here in you I find shelter, captivated by the splendor of your face, my secret place. And I'm wide awake, drawing closer by grace, and oh, my heart is yours, and all fear removed. I breathe you in, I lean into your love. Oh, your love. Your love so deep is washing over me. Your face is all I seek. You are my everything. Jesus Christ, you are my one desire. Lord, in my only cry, to know you all my life. Love so deep is washing over me. Your face is all I seek. You are my everything. Jesus Christ, you are my one desire. Lord, in my only cry, to know you all my life. I'm wide awake, I'm drawing closer by grace, and oh, my heart is yours, and all fear removed. I breathe you in, I lean into your love. Oh, your love.
Hey Impact, it's Josh, and here's the deal. You've probably heard of this before. This thing is called the fight or flight response. If you've never heard of it, the fight or flight response is this physiological reaction, right, that occurs in response to a perceived harm or some kind of event, or like an attack or some sort of threat to our survival. And basically when we go into this fight or flight response, it's like our body is suddenly thinking that, hey, I'm in a situation where I think I might die. And so you are basically going to, in in that situation do one of three different things. You are either going to fight, or you're going to flight, which means you're going to run away, or you're going to absolutely freeze. And what's crazy about this is that we actually don't have a lot of say in how this goes. Like, you might think like, oh, I'm super tough, but sometimes when something crazy happens and you're like terrified, you just completely freeze. Or you might think, you know what, I'm the kind of person that when there's trouble, I am gonna get out of here. But for some reason, when there actually is trouble, you're the person that suddenly like jumps into action. There's really no good way to know which kind of person you are until you're in that type of situation. Now, in this situation, what happens is your autonomic nervous system absolutely takes over. So check out what your autonomic nervous system can do. It can change your heart rate. It can change how quick or how slowly you're breathing. It can make your eyes dilate or get really, really narrow. Your ears, it can like suddenly you hear more than you thought you would. Your blood starts pumping a lot faster or sometimes even a lot slower. You can start sweating even though you're super cold, or suddenly your skin might look really pale, or you might get goosebumps. Or even with your hands and feet, when during this kind of response, all the blood in your body actually flows to your major organs like your heart and your lungs, and so your hands and your feet actually have less blood, and so they might get cold. And what's really interesting to me is our perception of pain changes when this happens. It is sometimes we actually feel pain more, and sometimes we actually feel pain less. Now, the common denominator in this fight or flight response really comes down to fear. It's when we are experiencing something that we are afraid of, that's when that response kicks in. Now, chances are pretty good, at least if you're being honest with yourself, that we've all been in a situation where we've been afraid, right? And you think about it, it's different depending on how old you are. When you were a little kid, there was always that like monster in the closet, or there was, you hear the floorboards outside your room creak, and it's amazing what you could come up with for being an explanation for those things. And that's when you suddenly tense up. But when you're in middle school, it actually gets a little bit different. Our fears change from being afraid of the monster under the bed or in the closet to being afraid of like failing a class or being late to class or being rejected by our friends or walking into school one day and for no good reason being made fun of. But now you're in high school, and honestly, fear in high school is very different, but I hope you're starting to maybe realize that fear, even though it changes over time, it's not necessarily something that we just grow out of. There's not this like magical day of your life where suddenly you're just not afraid of anything anymore. Fear is a part of our lives. It's natural, it's normal. It just looks very different for different people and different ages. But really and truly, if we were to try and figure out what is it that causes us fear, what is it that causes us probably the most fear, or what is it the thing that most people fear, it really, and this sounds kind of dark, but it really comes down to death, right? And not just like physically dying, but really the thing that I think scares us is when something that we like or something that we love comes to an end. We fear death because that means like the end of life, or we may fear breaking up with our boyfriend or girlfriend or being broken up with by our boyfriend or girlfriend because it means the end of a relationship that we really enjoy. Or even when we're afraid of doing something wrong, and then especially afraid of getting caught, it's not necessarily that we're thinking that that's going to lead to our imminent death, but it really does mean that maybe some of our freedom is going to be taken away. That's why we hate being grounded, or why we hate being punished, because there were things that we loved to do that now we can't. So really, these fears, it's amazing how when you start tracing all of them back, it really does come back to this idea that we, as human beings, as people, and not just as high schoolers, but as middle schoolers and elementary schoolers and adults, and we have a fear of death. And we have a fear of the things that we love and the things that we enjoy coming to an end. We fear death because it's so final. But here's what is super cool. That right there, in that fear, is where Easter actually comes in. Easter is born, Easter exists right in the middle of our most primal fear. Easter lives right in the midst of death. For those of us that follow Jesus, this is actually the time of year that we celebrate how he came to earth, died on a cross as a criminal, and then 3 days later, when nobody expected it, he rose from the dead. And that truth can be absolutely life-changing. Now that truth is especially life-changing for this guy in the Bible named Paul. We've talked about him a lot before. He's one of the most famous Christians throughout all of history. He wrote a ton of the New Testament. He is the guy to talk to because before he became a follower of Jesus, he actually spent years of his life trying to scare Christians into leaving their faith. And he would threaten them with death. He would actually threaten them with that thing that we say that we probably all fear the most. And then an incredible thing happens. Paul meets Jesus. Yeah, the Jesus who was dead but isn't dead anymore. That Jesus. He meets Jesus and it literally changes absolutely everything in Paul's life. Now from that moment on, Paul's life was literally constantly in danger. In fact, it's because of Paul's faith that he was ultimately killed. But here's what's amazing about Paul and about his life after he met Jesus. He was able to do something that I feel like so few people I've ever met have been able to do. He was able to live without a fear of death. And so when we look at Paul's letters that he wrote to the churches all around the world, we actually start to be able to see why it was that Paul was able to not have that same fear that it seems like everyone in the world does and should have. It says this in 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verse 54 and 55. Paul is saying this. He says, "Death is swallowed up in victory. O death, where is your victory? O death, where is your sting?" You see, what Paul is telling us here is that when Jesus died and then rose again, he actually did something that we all thought was absolutely impossible. He actually defeated death. That very thing where all of our fear is rooted. And then Paul takes it a step further and he's saying, hey, if Jesus defeated death, we need to know that because of that, death can no longer defeat us because it's already been defeated. And if Jesus defeats the root of our fear, then the good news is that Easter means that fear isn't final. You see, Impact, the thing we need to know is that if Jesus can defeat death, that thing that we as human beings fear the most, then we also have to know that he can defeat anything that we fear. Because fear only has power when it can convince us that it has no end. When it can convince us that it itself is final, that there is no end to it, that our fear stands on its own. So, your fear, whether it is a fear of death or whether it's a fear of spiders or public speaking or being rejected by your friends or being made fun of or being late to something, or there are so many different things in this world that we can be afraid of. But the good news is that literally none of those fears are final. When Jesus died and rose from the dead, defeating death, he was telling us, hey, guess what I can do? I can defeat not only death, but I can defeat everything that you could ever fear. Because nothing is bigger or stronger or more powerful than Jesus Christ. So then we have to ask ourselves, what do we do when we're still afraid, right? Because, I mean, we can know this in our heads that, okay, if Jesus conquered death, that he destroyed death, that he defeated death, and that means that he can defeat anything that we ever fear, but yet we still find ourselves afraid of things. How do we handle that? What do we do with that? Well, here's the thing that we need to remember, is that because of Jesus, we are actually more equipped, we are better equipped to handle those things that we are afraid of than we actually realize. So check out what Paul says in Romans chapter 8, verse 11. He says, if the spirit of him who raised Jesus from the dead dwells in you, so he's saying, if that same God that raised Jesus from the grave lives in you, if he is a part of your life, then he who raised Christ from the dead will also give life to your mortal bodies through the Spirit who dwells in you. He's saying that literally that same power that raised Jesus from the dead, that allowed him to defeat the one thing that we consider to be undefeatable, that one thing that we consider to be insurmountable, that we can't win against, he can. He is able to defeat that, and that same power that was in him is in you. And so if that same power that let Jesus raise from the dead is in you, then he has given you the power to not only overcome fear of death, but to overcome the fear of literally anything. Listen, Impact, we have to remember that that power that is in us, we need to remember not only is it real, but it is in fact available to us when we are faced with our own fears. That it's not just three options that we have, that fight, flight, or freeze. We have another option. We are able to put our faith in the one that gave Jesus that exact same power to overcome the grave. I want to be absolutely clear. That power that defeated death 2,000 years ago when Jesus rose from the grave is actually inside every single person who believes in Jesus today. And if that does include you, then you need to know that you have that same power to defeat every fear.
Impact, we are so glad that you're with us today. Fear can be incredibly daunting and overwhelming at times, but remember, there is a great comfort in knowing that because Jesus conquered death, fear, it is not final. We have the power of Jesus running in our veins, and he beat death, and that means he can conquer any fear that you have. So this week, something I want to challenge you with is to really think about what are those fears that you have. Try digging a little bit and think about those hard fears that you have. And I know that's scary, but it's okay because you're not alone. Some of the best things that we can do is name that and then talk about it. So talk about it with your family, your friends, and your small group, and know you are not alone in the fears you have. And the more community you have and bring into that, the better it's gonna be. Before we head out, I wanna let you know that we do have a game for you. However, this game is happening later in the week on Thursday. Some of you may already know Josh does the game show on Thursday nights at 6 on YouTube, and that is where we're gonna be playing our game this week. If you tune in, you'll get a chance to play all sorts of games and a chance to win some pretty cool prizes. Last week, we delivered a pizza to a student, we gave out some cool student ministry swag, and we gave out even more Grubhub gift cards. So make sure to come right back here onto YouTube. Look us up, WCL Students, and Thursday night at 6, Josh will be hosting our game show. All right, Impact, it was great to be with you, and I hope you have a great rest of your week, and we'll see you next Sunday. Bye.